Welcome to RomConned. I'm Laurel House, dating and relationship expert, joined by my co-host, criminologist Dr. Alex Del Carmen. Today's story is about a different kind of predator, not the flashy scammer with the private jet, not the love bomber proposing on date 3, but the one who creeps in through the softest parts of your soul. They don't chase you, they comfort you. They don't promise dreams. They show up when you're broken, when you're grieving, when you're lonely. They don't ask for your heart. They earn your dependencies, one "I'm here for you" at a time. This is the comfort con, where safety becomes the bait and vulnerability becomes currency. And later in the episode, we'll be joined by Renee Williams, CEO of the National Center for Victims of Crime, to talk about why victims of emotional cons carry shame longer, are blamed harder, and recover slower. People don't steal your money, they steal your meaning. They don't ask for sex or gifts. They ask for your grief, your hope, your heart, your purpose. That's not love, that's predation. Today's story isn't about a dumb man who fell for a young yoga girl. It's about a widower, a father who survived cancer loss, survived devastation, but didn't survive loneliness. His name is David, and his predator didn't target his wallet first. She targeted his wounds. David is 52. His wife died 3 years earlier. He wasn't chasing love. He was chasing silence that didn't hurt. His daughter convinced him to try dating apps. She said, "Dad, Mom would want you to live again." He matched with Sophia. She was 31, a yoga teacher. She rescued dogs. She said in her bio, "I help people feel whole again." Well, that sounded great. She didn't open with flirting. She opened with empathy. She said, "Tell me about your late wife. What did she teach you about love?" That's how emotional predators operate. They don't ask for six-pack photos. They ask for the scars. He cried with her on FaceTime. She didn't rush to stop it. She framed it with, "You're a real man." Strong men feel deeply. When you've been invisible for years, validation feels like oxygen. Sophia called him my warrior. She talked about spirit contracts and past lives, about needing a protector. She didn't future fake marriage. She future faked destiny. That's how emotional groomers work. They spiritualize attachment. They weaponize purpose. The first ask was small. "My studio is shutting down. I'll pay you back when I'm stable. $2,500. Not that big of a deal." And it wasn't only because she needed it. It was because he needed to be needed. Then came the emergencies, the vet bills, the car problems, rent increase, friend betrayal. He went from match to partner to savior. And here's the trap. He wanted her healing. They picked out Sedona Homes online. She said, "I'll finally have the peace so that I can heal you." He bought her a plane ticket, and she missed it. Then another, and then the trauma spiral. He didn't get angry. Instead, "I'll be here when you're ready." This is how caretakers lose everything. Not with a bang, but with patience. His daughter found the receipts. Over 60,000 in 6 months. And when Sophia disappeared, he didn't file police reports. He didn't warn anyone. He said one sentence to a friend, and that was, "I should have known better. I'm a grown man."
We see this, right, more often than not. Here's a man that loses his wife that had, I'm sure, a great relationship with her
Yeah,
and really was conditioned to believe in human beings, right? I mean,
yeah.
when you've been married for a long time, especially to the right person, we begin to sort of trust humanity because we think, all of a sudden our guard is down. We feel that that relationship is wonderful, great, and then all of a sudden she's taken. All of a sudden she passes. Our world is just completely collapsing. We have no hope in anything. And of course, the loving daughter says to him, "Dad, mom would have loved if you had rebuilt your life
Yeah,
and you remain happy the rest of the time that you're there. So here's this man with all of the vulnerabilities that we can possibly have after losing our spouse, having believed in her for so long and having been told the truth for so long. It becomes
right.
almost the norm.
It's
And so
expectation.
it's expectations.
Yeah,
And also remember too that when we are in a long-term relationship, sometimes we're in a vacuum, an emotional vacuum, where
yeah,
we are not really contemplating or even paying attention to how the world is evolving around us and how people are becoming perhaps more sophisticated in their crimes and their abuses and the things that they do to each other because we live in that vacuum. We're
right.
happy,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden he loses her. He wasn't ready for that, I'm sure. And then he takes this
Mm-mm.
extraordinary step of going out there to test the water, so to speak. And he's going there with the same intentions, I'm sure, that he had when he started dating his wife,
Right.
hoping that the same outcome was going to take place.
Expecting the same outcome to take place
Expecting
because
it,
why
precisely.
wouldn't it?
Precisely. I mean, that's the experience he had. Clearly, is the same experience he's gonna have in the future.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now he realizes that he's being taken advantage of and that all this money has been gone in 6 months, and that if the daughter had not perhaps found this receipt, had not called it to his attention, who knows where this would have ended up.
Yeah. And he probably took this energy, this feeling, this love, this trust that he had for his wife, and he just picked it up and placed it on this new person. This is something that I see all of the time with people who have been in long term committed relationships and then start dating again. They date like they're married, which means that they are acting the same way. They are giving the same trust. They have the same expectations of behavior, of what they will receive from the other person. And sometimes that can be really scary for the person who they're dating, especially at the beginning when this person was used to the every morning, good morning, every night, good night, the expectation of their weekly Saturday date night, of having that comfort, that vulnerability with someone. And then all of a sudden they're placing all of this, which is kind of a lot and kind of heavy, especially when you're dating someone new, and they're placing it on this new person. Well, to someone who isn't Sophia the scam artist, to someone who's just a new dater, they may have said, whoa, whoa, this is a lot. Like, let's take it slow. We're just starting to newly date. But instead, Sophia was, give it all to me. Give me your vulnerability. Give me those tears. Drop your guard. Let me see it all. Because then she can put her hooks in you. You can put your hooks in someone much easier when they are standing there emotionally unprotected, emotionally naked. That's when you
Yeah.
got them. And it's just, this story to me is so sad and so common, and not sad in that David is a sad sack, but sad in that I feel so sad for David that he went through. I mean, he's being re-traumatized, right? Because he was traumatized by the loss of his wife. And then 6 months into a relationship, he's smacked in the face emotionally by another huge trauma. And the thing is, though, that men don't fall for scams because they're gullible. He wasn't gullible. They fall because someone finally sees them after grief, after divorce, after failure. Validation becomes intoxicating.
2 points that I think are important to make here. First of all, there's a generational gap here where, he is older than she is. And by virtue of that, the rules of dating may have been very, very different at the time that
Right.
he dated his wife.
Yes.
Whereas now there's all these, the technology is different. The expectations that people have about dating are different. To your point earlier about him treating her, like his wife. I mean, surely in, 20, 30 years ago, that would have been a really comforting thing to anyone dating, right? They
Yeah.
would have been like, well, you're already treating me with respect, dignity, love, affection, and all of these great things, just like you would treat me as a wife. And so to
Yeah.
get married to you is nothing more than an evolution
Mhm.
than going from phase one to phase two, because we don't really have to do much because I'm already treating you as if you were my spouse.
Right.
Whereas now everything is so fluid. Things are just so quickly changing. You can date somebody, but then you can date 5 other people at the same time, and no one really expects a commitment. And, you know, having a relationship is sort of like, well, I have one today, I may not have one tomorrow. And I'm not suggesting that, morals and values have changed as much as I am suggesting that the expectation that people have, the
Yeah.
tools that people have are very different than they had before. So here's that reality. And then what she sees in him is someone who lost a spouse,
Mm.
who likely was loyal to her.
Yep.
I mean, she saw right through that, right?
Yep.
This is a man that is not only vulnerable, but he's a good guy.
Right.
And he's going to believe everything that I throw his way.
Right.
And all I have to do is basically show him that I could be easily his wife again, and that he could bring her back, and in many ways have sort of a different relationship, but still with the same qualities that he probably fell in love with his wife.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all of those things. And as soon as I have him hooked up, then I'm going to start making the withdrawals, not only money-wise, but emotional withdrawals as well.
And the age difference as well. Oftentimes when someone has been in a very long-term relationship and they start dating again, they tend to pick up where they left off. So he may be dating someone significantly younger because that's the age when he was dating back then. So it was dating then when he was 30, was fun, was free, he was liberated, it was exciting. So he finds this woman who is 31. She's a yoga instructor. She's fun and airy-fairy and exciting. And that reminds him of how he used to be with his wife when they started dating. So it's exciting. And it's almost like I get to have a second chance to live the second half of my life. I get to have a second chance. But we see this exact predator pattern over and over, not the financial extraction first, the identity grooming. And predators study loss like surgeons, widowers, newly divorced fathers, men who lost status, who had some great paying job or some title, and then all of a sudden they don't. Well, that's also the type of person who a predator would want to attack. They're vulnerable, and it's not because they're weak, but because they've been emotionally starved. And that's what these people want. So let's look at the red flags. The emotional grooming, these are male specific red flags. She asks about your trauma in the first 3 conversations, not your hobbies, not your likes, but your wounds. That's going really deep. And I do say, if you want something real, get real. And I do say that it's important to get raw if you want to have a real relationship. And there's a balance. And she just went right for the depth. What are your thoughts on that?
There's no question. And she's been studying him. I want folks listening to our podcast to imagine going to an X-ray machine and putting a person through an X-ray. That is what the predators will do with you. But it's an emotional X-ray. It's an emotional MRI. It's an emotional CAT scan. The idea is they're going to put you through this test of theirs, this instrument that they've developed over the years. And they're going to analyze on a 3-dimensional perspective what your psychological traumas are, what your weak points are, and then they're going to absolutely go for what they know works, which is trying to address those. And so for me, the fact that she's trying to identify the wounds, she's trying to identify the weak points, if you want to call it that, without any interest about you.
That's exactly what she's doing. Right.
And without really being interested in, your strengths or what are the things that you like. But rather, tell me a little bit more about how you felt when you were injured by your former relationship.
She doesn't want to know him. She wants to know his hurts.
Right.
It's not him, the man, who she wants to know.
Right.
It's the weakness that she wants to learn. And then she calls him rare or different from all other men. This is exceptionalism. And it is also leverage because she knows he's weak, he's down, and she's making him feel special.
Well, she's also giving him an identity. Right. She's making him feel that not only validated, but, look, you are unique. Any woman that you would be with would be so fortunate You are so special. I love your charisma. I love the
Mm-hmm.
way you speak. I love the way you walk. I love that you're
Mm.
just a man. You don't apologize for that. So that person receiving that information is going, wow, this is a person that is really understands who I am and that
Yeah.
loves the way that I walk and the way that I speak and my confidence. This is someone that I can count as a true partner because she has realized that your weak points are that you are insecure, that you are walking around like a wounded bird, that you are feeling vulnerable. And she knows how to flip that around and make it into a strength, which is what you really want to hear. And
Yeah.
so once she convinces you that she is the only audience that you will ever need, that's when she pulls you in and starts getting all of those resources that she's been wanting to. And it becomes a one-way relationship at that point.
And she's injecting life into him. She's injecting magnetism into him. She's injecting masculinity back into him because she's the injector. All of a sudden, she's part of it. He isn't any of this without her. She is making it so part of his identity is her. This is a meshment that she's creating. I mean,
Right.
what she did was really incredible and horrible.
It is. I mean, it's devilish brilliant, right? I
Right.
mean, it's in the sense that, it's you can still be brilliant but be, evil, right, in what
Right.
you do. And so
Yep.
I think it's kind of like saying, look, if you step into this zone or this area, you are going to be loved, appreciated, cared for. I'm going to tell you all the things you want to hear and then some. But if you step outside of this area, you're
Right.
going to be just a common person. And
Right.
who wants to be just a common
You
person,
can't
right? So
cry out there with everyone else. You can't be
right.
weak. You
Right,
can't be
because they will not
vulnerable.
understand you. They will not
Right.
understand you. And
Right.
so I'm the only one that you need. I'm the only gasoline that your car needs to run. I'm the only mechanic that can look under the hood of that car. I'm the
Yep.
only person that's really going to appreciate the art in what you do. And so once
Mhm.
you become emotionally dependent on that feedback, once you have to hear from her only and only her how special you are, then she becomes not only your coach, but she also becomes your referee. She
Right.
becomes your emotional referee. She becomes that person that's looking at you and saying, this goes, this doesn't go. Oh, by the way, I love that shirt on you.
Yeah.
And I love that suit on you because it makes you look a certain way. Well, guess what's going to happen next time you go shopping?
That's right.
And she's going to say to you, well, I don't think that suit really compliments you. You should go return it and get something else. But what is happening now is that she's now exerting control over your judgment.
Yep.
Same thing happens with the car. Same thing happens with your bank account. So all of a sudden you're giving yourself your identity,
Yep.
your thing that made you you. You're losing control over all of those things. And I mean, I heard from a guy that recently divorced and said, I went to the store, to buy a shirt. And I had no idea what color I liked anymore. I had no idea what type of shirt I liked anymore because all of that had been taken away. All that individuality that makes us who we are have been removed because her criteria and her decisions were what actually governed the way he ate, where he
Yep.
went, the job that he had, the car that he drove, and the money that he made and how much of that money was being spent on her.
And it happens to both men and women. It happened to
No
me.
question.
I was in a relationship within which I moved to another state to be with this guy. I was removed from my family, my friends. I felt very isolated. I was in a totally new world. And he said, your wardrobe is terrible. You need a new wardrobe. I'm going to buy it for you. You can select 10 things that you want to keep, and the rest is trash. And we literally went through everything, pulled out 10 items that I was allowed to keep. Everything else went in the trash. When I finally ended the relationship 3 years later, I remember sitting in the kitchen of one of his houses that I was allowed to stay in for 1 month until I could figure myself out, and crying because I thought, I don't even know how to speak to people. I don't know what I like to eat for breakfast. I don't know who I am. And I felt like I was made of cards, that I could crumple at any moment. And I remember eating cereal thinking, I think I like this. I haven't eaten cereal in years. And I had to rebuild who I was. And I realized all these clothes that he got me, that he said, you are so lucky that I'm buying you this new wardrobe, because it was Dior, Prada, Gucci. And yeah, I was lucky, but you're so lucky that you get to have this beautiful wardrobe. So I felt lucky. But when we ended, I looked at my clothes and thought, I don't like any of these clothes. They are all so uncomfortable. I can't even move around. And so I sold them all. But this happens to both men and women. So back to David, another thing that his predator did was she used spiritual language to justify the intensity, we are fated, we are twin flames, I am meant to be here to heal you. This is manipulation dressed as mysticism. So not only is she defining his whole world, she is now adding a component to his identity that he never had before, and that is a new spiritual identity. So now he's going to become this slightly spiritual person. And why? Because she made him that person. So all of a sudden, another part of who he is, who he identifies as himself, it doesn't belong to him. It belongs to her. She just affixed it to him.
Right. And what they do is they actually study the field and they get ready, right? So before they even meet their victims, they are putting their toolkit together of the things that they are going to use, right?
Yeah.
So I make the analogy of saying somebody that plays all sports. And what I mean by all sports is this person plays soccer, volleyball, baseball, football, rugby, you name it. Right?
They're a yoga teacher, they're a swimmer,
right,
they're a
yoga
runner.
teacher, they're a swimmer, they're a runner. They do everything, right? They eat all kinds of food. They eat all the way from sushi to a hamburger. They eat at cheap restaurants, they eat at expensive restaurants. They know how to carry themselves in a formal conversation, and they also know how to be incredibly unpolite. So all of this person has multi skills, and they are. This is what I mean by the toolkit. Yeah. And then they meet their victim. And when they meet their victim, they realize that the victim loves soccer. Well, out of all the sports that you know, soccer is the one you know the least, right? That predator knows the least about soccer. So guess what they're going to do that first night when they go back home? Yep. They're going to read up on soccer. They're going to know who all these soccer players are. They're going to know about FIFA coming into the United States next year and having the World Cup. They're going to know where to get the tickets. They're going to know what are the best seats in the soccer matches. They're going to know about what happened in the 90s, when the World Cup was being played by two countries that hated each other. So my point is that they're going to be so well-versed. Yeah. Remember, they only knew a little bit, but they knew a little bit of just about every sport in case you liked any of those sports. Yeah. So let's say they meet a victim that doesn't like any sports at all.
Here are the cards. Pick a card. Right, which one?
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. So the victim, this one victim loves art. Well, I know a little bit about Van Gogh, but guess what? They love Picasso. So I'm going to learn a lot about Picasso, who Picasso was, where he was born, how he lived, so that I can carry that conversation and be trained in being your best friend as we enjoy the arts together.
And so be impressive to you.
And be impressive to you and also be competent, right? And be quote unquote, Laurel, who would have thought that we both like Picasso? Like, what are the chances of people running into each other that love the same type of art and the same era in which Picasso painted? And so my point in saying this is these are astute students of behavior that are completely changeable in terms of color, texture, the way they move. They're adaptable to any type of behavior, because ultimately what they want to do is appeal to that higher authority that somehow destiny brought you together, and that is not something that I did to manipulate the color of how I look to you or my personality, but it was destiny. Yep. Destiny brought us together. And that destiny, by the way, was nothing more than a quick rehearsal the night before about all the things that you want to hear for me to tell you today, and how I want to charm my way into your life, telling you that we're so compatible because we enjoy the arts exactly the same. It's like, where have you been all my life? Those are comments that are made, right?
And it's also, we have all of these in common, but you know what you're missing? You're missing the spiritual side. That's what you need. Or you know so much about restaurants, but you don't know about wine. I can teach you about wine. So all of a sudden, they are your teacher. and that will make you want to be closer to them. Then she never asks you to date her. She asks you to save her. She all of a sudden, you're the one who's hurting, but she all of a sudden has the financial emergencies. She is an energy vampire. She has endless life chaos, and you're coming in to save her. Wait, didn't she say at the beginning that she was there to save you? And now all of a sudden, you're the one who needs to save her. And she makes you feel guilty for questioning her. Predators don't earn trust. They punish doubt. And those are some of the red flags that David fell for. So let's look at the predator playbook. This is the healer archetype. This isn't a gold digger. It's a psychological operator. She's doing the spiritual bonding. We met for a reason. The trauma mirroring. You know, I've been hurt too. And look, you can see I'm hurting. I have problems in my life, and you can help me now. The caretaker targeting. You're the only one who understands. The rescue requests, small, then medium, then large. And with David, it got up to $60,000. The escalating emergencies, every time he pulls away, then the disappearance and reset. They vanish when extraction stops. The healer doesn't seduce you physically. They seduce you emotionally. They don't want your body. They want your purpose. And that's what happened to David. She created purpose for him. And that purpose was intertwined in her. And without her, what did he have? Well, he was a crying mess. So he needed her.
And they want more than anything. They want to be able to have you in such a place that when the predator or when the con artist is not around you, you feel a vacuum. You feel a need.
Yes.
You are absolutely in absolute need to have that person physically or emotionally present. And so the dependency, you got to remember that with dependency comes control. With control comes the abuse, right?
Yep.
And so when you have that dependency on someone emotionally, that you cannot get by an 8 to 5 job because you just, I mean, boy, I wish you could be here and we could talk
Yeah.
about this. We could talk about that. And
Yeah.
so you have been absolutely hijacked emotionally to the extent that your dependency to function, not even to excel, but to function, your basic needs have to be met through that person.
Yeah.
And that is when they have you, and they have you completely controlled, and they know that. And
Yeah.
that is their sweet spot as to when they're going to start making the big asks of you. And Laurel, there's another point here that I think it just cannot be missed, which is, they may even invoke a breakup. They may even
Right.
facilitate a breakup because by doing that breakup and by you going through the agony of missing that person,
Yes.
and I need you. I was such a fool that I even doubted you. What's $2,000? What's $10,000?
Yes.
What they'll do is they'll come back, and they're going to come back with conditions.
Yep.
They're going to say, well, if I'm going to go back to your life, this is the way we're going to have to do this phase 2,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so in other words, what they've done is they've created a little bit of chaos so that they can remind you how much you need them,
Yep.
how much you cannot exist without them, so that when they come back for phase 2, the ask is going to be much bigger.
So strategic. Yeah. And then when you finally catch on and you realize I have been conned, too many men don't report it because society tells men victimhood equals weakness. Law enforcement sees romance scams as financial crimes. Men see them as emotional failures. So men rarely speak up. So how do you heal? When men are conned, they don't just grieve the person. They grieve the identity that they were allowed to become with the person. You're not weak because you trusted. You're human because you hoped. Healing starts with reclaiming agency, and you need to do that through therapy, coaching, connection, community, accountability, reporting, education. Shame protects predators. Disclosure protects victims?
I wish I could tell you that the law enforcement community or the criminal justice system is equipped to handle, victims, especially men that have been victimized, that have this shame
Yeah.
to admit that they made a mistake, that they were taken advantage of. But unfortunately, the criminal justice system is just not ready for that,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure it'll ever be ready. I think what we're going to find is we're going to find that many of these individuals that have been victimized are going to be re-victimized because, first of all, they're too scared to tell the story.
Yeah.
Secondly, they're too ashamed to share it with even loved ones. And thirdly, because of that, they're going to find themselves vulnerable again to perhaps a bigger and better predator, in the future. And so, that's what hopefully this space that we are providing for the public, not only to learn about these issues, but also how to really arm themselves with what is necessary, both men and women.
Yeah.
We often say in this program, this is not just a woman issue. This is not just a man issue. It's really about both, and it's really about individuals that are just vulnerable, loving, and caring,
Yes.
that give themselves to somebody else, and then they're taken advantage of not only once but several times.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I know you feel the same way as I do, which is we dedicate these programs oftentimes to these victims, right? That
Yeah.
are our next door neighbors, the people that we sit next to, at an airport or in a plane or at a movie theater, because it really is any of us and many of us that have been victimized by these individuals. And it doesn't take, someone who is dumb or someone who is vulnerable. Oftentimes I say that the brightest people in the world are the
Mhm.
people that have the greatest feelings, right? Because we
Yeah.
we often say people that are bright are sensitive to other people's emotions, to other people's feelings. And so it's got not as a sign of lack of intelligence. It's really a sign of perhaps being intelligent,
Yeah.
being caring and being loving, but always sadly being vulnerable because of the very thing that attracted you to that person in the first place.
And that's also why it's important. What you said is they are often re-victimized. And that's often because we're not identifying, we are not stating, we are not realizing that I have been conned. Instead, we're making excuses. Instead, we're saying, oh, it was just a bad relationship, or oh, I was stupid, or oh, I should have known better. That self dismissiveness is one of the reasons why you will be conned again. So instead, it's, you know what? I was conned and I wasn't stupid. And they really used me. And this is how they did it. And that's why we have the show so that you can examine the red flags, examine the predator's playbook so that you can understand what really happened to you so that you don't allow it to happen again.
He seems perfect, but something feels off, and I can't put my finger on it. Okay, have you verified anything he's told you? Well, no, but can't I just believe him? Wanting to believe is idealistic, and it opens you up potentially for getting RomConned. Before you invest your heart, verify that what he says is correct. A quick background check on Truthfinder can tell you if he is who he says he is. So I don't have to guess? Exactly. Trust is earned. Truthfinder helps you verify before you get hurt.
And I'm so thrilled to bring in someone who sees the aftermath every day. Renee E. Williams, CEO of the National Center for Victims of Crime. Thank you so much for being on RomCon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, what makes romance cons different?
Well, I think one of the big things that we see is there's a lot of shame surrounding these victims. Frauds of any kind have become kind of the last place where we truly see victim blaming in the victim services field. It is still okay for people, or they think it's okay, for them to say, what did you do? How did you fall for this? Even the language we use around these scams, and well meaning people who use this language will say, how did you fall for it?
Right.
The other thing that we see quite a bit is people don't understand the gravity of what these victims go through. A lot of times they say, oh, it's just money. And they don't understand the amount of shame. Sometimes it's entire life savings. Sometimes it causes family disruptions and disturbances because the family will even say, how could you be so stupid?
Yeah.
And I think what we see with people who have been conned in a romantic sense, it's especially tragic because whenever you end a relationship, you mourn that relationship. So whether or not this person was real, or not, it was a real relationship to that person. And
In the
so,
heart.
yeah. And so in addition to mourning a breakup, because your heart doesn't know the difference between whether they were real or not. So you're
Right.
mourning that breakup while desperately trying to get your life back together from all the damage that person caused.
Right. And other people also don't understand the grooming that goes on behind the scenes and leading up to the narcissistic abuse. And then, of course, as you mentioned, that you should have known culture and the level of embarrassment and betrayal. I myself have been RomConned and I experienced all of it. And it wasn't really about money, although I did lose some money. They didn't ask me for money. It was the fear. He tried to kill me, and it was the emotional and the shame and the how did this happen to me situation. And even other people, as you said, how'd this happen to you? What's wrong with you? You know, with a what's wrong with you? It's not just that I created my own internal shame, and this is what I believe a lot of victims go through who we speak with, is the shame actually is put on them by society, by friends, by family. It's not just I was walking down the street and someone punched me or stabbed me or whatever, something happened to me. It was I contributed to this something that happened.
And I think to these folks, we would never just say to somebody, oh, you just got punched in the face, or you just got raped. But we say all the time, you just lost this. This just happened. It was just a scam. We assume that people aren't just as hurt and that trauma isn't just as bad.
Right.
So, Renee, I have a follow-up to that. Do you feel that there is almost a second layer of victimization by the family towards the individual? In other words, the person's already hurting from the victimization that was actually created or caused by the con artist, right? And then now here's the first layer, second layer of effect of that victimization by the actual family that simply ridicules. I mean, you said something that really caught my attention when you talked about how people say, you know, how could you be so dumb that you fell for this? And of course, it's great to Monday morning quarterback all day long, but at the same time, they themselves would have fallen prey to many of the things that were being used by these people that are incredibly good at the evil that they do.
Yep, I think that's right. I think I wouldn't call it re-victimization, but I would call it re-traumatization, or just not being very sensitive to somebody's trauma, which we call trauma-informed in the field, but that's a very loaded phrase. I think also what you point out correctly is that nobody quite understands, unless you face this, just how brilliant these con artists are. It is not easy to spot. I get millions of texts every day that I know are scams because my number's out there in one of the ethospheres of people being able to try to con me of, oh, hey, we met at this party. Don't you remember I was this person? It just happened over Halloween. Oh, we met at the Halloween party. So I think that it's very hard to understand unless you've been on the receiving end of this, just how brilliant these people are and just how much they know, Laurel, as you pointed out, of how to groom victims correctly, very slowly, very cautiously, very easily. And we've all been in a relationship. The first 3-4 weeks are the most exciting time. You know, everything that person does is great. And so they're very cautious to get that excitement built in those 3 weeks. And you don't ask any big favors or need anything. But then when you have that person hooked 4 to 5 months in, you start to slowly do the asks, and they know to do that and they know to go slow.
Yeah. And they also, what we've been finding is that the victims are often the people who you would never expect to be the victims. We have had numerous therapists reach out to us, doctors, attorneys who say, I was conned. I've had numerous therapists who've reached out just because they needed to share their story with someone who would understand, because I've been conned too. And then they say, and I don't want you to share my story because it could ruin my career. And
it goes back to that shame.
That's right. What is the single most common emotional response that your organization sees after someone realizes that they've been scammed? Once it's like, hold on, I was scammed, as opposed to it was just a bad relationship.
It's still disbelief. It's still that didn't happen. Here are all the reasons that my situation is not this. So there is still the absolute disbelief at first. It takes a while to get to anger. There's a great chart and we have it available on our site, but it's from our friends at Give an Hour. And they have plotted out 0 to 3 months, the emotions that people are probably going to feel. But by the point you get to about a year out, you're getting to anger. But at first, it's disbelief, it's fear. And I think also the best way to put it is a sense of being overwhelmed. Because in that
Mhm.
first, especially week, you're trying to figure out, how do I close down my credit cards? What else do they have? How do I
Right.
recover from this? So you're just in survival mode. You haven't even been able to process yet.
Do I need to move? I moved.
Correct. Yeah. So you don't even get to process the anger, the fear, the sadness. You're in
Right.
survival mode of, what do I do to lock this
Yes.
down?
And I think it sounds like what you're saying also is excuses. People are making the excuses of why it wasn't a rom-con. And it's also, I think they're going into not only their mind, but the mind of their friends and family. Well, here's why it's not a rom-con. Here's why it was just a bad relationship. Trying to justify it, rationalize it, excuses, so that it was just a bad relationship. And I wasn't actually conned.
And I think most of us want to believe the best in other humans. Most of
Yes.
us are not jaded at our core. And so we want to believe that there was just a misunderstanding. This person wouldn't have done this to me. It's just this happened. There was this extenuating circumstance, because we don't want to believe that somebody could be so cruel, so harsh, so manipulative, so awful.
What makes romance scam victims uniquely vulnerable when it comes to the healing process?
I think it's not only with romance scams, but with almost all frauds. When I am helping a victim of violent crime, I can help them avoid trigger factors for the most part. We can have coaching lessons and safety planning on, let's not go to this area, let's not watch this. With the way the world works now, with technology and how reliant we are on technology, that's very hard to do for fraud victims. You have to have a cell phone. Somebody is going to
Right.
text you. You bank online. Our whole lives are available online, as are our images. So individuals who are victims of fraud have to interact in ways that might be triggering to them, but there's no way out. And it's a terrible comparison. It'll tell you what I like in TV. I love to watch My 600-Pound Life. Total not great TV, but I like it. And it's, again, a terrible comparison. But the way I compare it to is, if you're talking to an alcoholic, you
Mhm.
can say avoid bars. You can
Right.
say don't go to this party. When you're talking to somebody who's addicted to food and who is obese, you can't say don't eat.
Right.
And it's kind of the same parallel with victims. If I have a victim of some type of violent crime, I can say, let's try to not go here. If this triggers you, let's not do this. You can give them protections. With
Mhm.
somebody who's been a victim of fraud, they have to interact in
Right.
ways that can still be very scary to them.
Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting, though, that you're saying that you can give people trigger warnings. So tell me how you work with people who come to you who have been conned, who are victims of crime.
So we always try to do a safety planning, make sure they have, first of all, access to resources. It is uniquely hard to find therapists who specialize in this
Yeah.
type of work. As of 2 years ago, there was one specialist in the whole nation. There is now an organization called Give an Hour, where they do try to get volunteer therapists in to help with these individuals. But our first thing is always, let's make sure we have somebody who can help you. But then it's financial safety planning. Let's figure out where we can shut this down. What
Right.
cards do we need to turn off? Let's get an inventory of things that this person had, of accesses they might have had. How do we restart it? And it's tedious. It's a lot
Mhm.
of work, but it's literally just walking that person through each thing that we can try to shut down.
You mentioned that there aren't many people who can actually help, many therapists out there who specialize in it. What are the other structural barriers that victims face when they try to seek help?
Legal, there are quite a few legal barriers. There aren't many private attorneys who even really have the ability to help here. Law enforcement struggles because it is also tech, or because most of the time these individuals are not based in the United States. A lot of
Uh-huh.
these scams run from other countries, so there are jurisdictional issues finding the individuals that are doing this. Individuals are going to struggle getting the closure that a lot of victims see that just get to go through the criminal justice process.
Right.
But also retrieving anything back is almost always a lost cause. And I hate to be so negative about it, but chances are you're never going to see that money again. And we get a lot of requests for attorney referrals to help sue someone. But who can you sue? There's nobody to sue to even win a lawsuit to have any type of recovery.
So, but one of the questions that I had for you, Renee, is I imagine that part of the fear that many of these victims have is that this will happen again. In other words, they finally realize that they're being conned. They're going through all of these processes to be able to heal. They realize that justice will never come. As you pointed out, as I mentioned earlier, criminologist of 29 years. I mean, if anybody knows that the criminal justice system doesn't work effectively, it's people like me, right? So they know that from a law enforcement side, from a victim side, from a judicial side. I mean, there's so many broken pieces to it. Now, having said that, I imagine that there are people that say, you know what, I've healed, I've moved beyond this, but I don't ever want to be in a relationship again. I will never trust anyone again. And of course, sometimes we say that and then we still fall for someone, right? Because that's just our nature. But I wonder, what do you do with those folks that have been victims twice or three times, in their lifetime? I mean, is there hope? What sort of resources do you provide for these folks?
And I think that's, again, just the coaching and the going through the checklist of let's do all of the things we can to get you to a place where you're in the best possible position for this to not happen again.
For someone listening right now who thinks maybe they're being scammed, they're not sure, what should they do today before they panic?
Ask to see things, ask to do a video chat. I mean, at a very core, video chatting is so real. So you can see if that person, and I'm still shocked that people don't do it or the excuses that people believe. But I mean, that's only step one, right? Do the video chat, confirm who you are, Google every single person, do your background research, make sure that that person is who they say they are and that there is some trace of seeing it. And if they start to ask for things, make sure that you're keeping a very close eye on that.
Someone who they're actually in real life in a relationship with, they've been with for 3, 4, 5 months, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. What about those people when they realize, wait, am I being scammed? What do they do?
So we actually had a victim come to us recently, and she had been in a relationship for years. She was living with this person. They, for all of the outside world, were completely in love and a great couple. And she found out that she had been giving him large amounts of her money that he said he was putting into Bitcoin, and he wasn't. And $200,000 later, and 3 years later, he said that he had been putting it into FTX, and FTX just fell apart. Well, if you're listening in 2025, FTX fell apart in 2022. So he's been lying to her face about the money that he put in for 3 years. And she found out because she happened to Google him and find a court case. With folks like that, if you have an instinct, follow it. The story she told us was she kept asking to see the documents, and there was always a reason he couldn't put their feet to the fire. And if you don't feel safe doing it, then get out. Because a lot of people are like, well, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel safe. Find ways to slowly get away from that relationship. But if things don't seem to make sense, start to look into those and trust your gut.
What about reporting to police? Going to that next step, contacting the FBI, doing something that allows you to start really documenting. What about confronting the scammer? What's your opinion on that?
I think that with all of those, each situation is different. So sometimes confronting your scammer is not safe. And we say this to individuals in DV relationships. Leaving immediately is not always the most safe option. So only individuals who are in a situation can take in all of the aspects of that situation and make a decision about what is best and what is safest for them. If you feel safe, if you feel comfortable about confronting, by all means do it, but don't feel pressured to. Start to ask questions in a non-aggressive way, but questions that make sense, like, oh, hey, can I see our login for that? Or I really don't understand how Bitcoin works. Could you explain it to me and show me on our account how this is working out? But if things aren't fitting together, it's not you. And I think what we see a lot in these relationships is gaslighting, is pure and simple gaslighting of you just don't understand. Oh, it's just too complicated. It doesn't matter. I have it all under control. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Always trust your gut, always trust your instinct. Do not let somebody tell you that you just wouldn't understand or it's just too complicated. If things don't make sense, chances are that's because they don't make sense.
In the law enforcement community, the first thing that they'll tell you is, did you both share the same roof?
Right.
Did you have a communal a marriage? Did
Yep.
you have, and some state laws, if you live with someone X number of years, so that person then becomes your defaulted spouse.
Yep.
And therefore, there is a medium of the idea that you have shared goods and services, right? So the other piece of this too is
And
that
suddenly there's nothing they can do for you
there's nothing
because,
right,
Mhm.
exactly. And then
it's, oh, you guys live together? Nothing we can do. Sorry.
well, not only that, you've got, in the case of a financial, quote unquote contribution as the money's being spent allegedly on some sort of an investment, it's your word versus that person's, right? So in other
Right.
words, there's nothing in writing, there's no contract, and oh yeah, well, you gave me that as a gift. No, no, I did not. You said that you were going to put it on Bitcoin. No, well, that's what you remember. That's not what I remember. And then so for law enforcement, it's very, very difficult to be able to figure out where the truth lies and have a compelling enough case to take it to court, right? On both on the civil matter as well as a criminal matter. And so the FBI will tell you, and as some of the audience members know, I worked in Quantico, taught at the FBI Academy for many years. And one of the things, the first things that will come up oftentimes is when they say the FBI, call the FBI. Well, the FBI will tell you, we are completely overburdened with all of these other things that we're having to do. And then here you come through the front door saying, well, I got scammed by my boyfriend who I lived with for 5 years
Or
because
I
he
think I'm
told,
being
or
scammed.
I
I
think I'm being
willingly gave
scammed.
him the money. I'm
I gave
willingly giving him
right,
money. Yes.
exactly. I gave him the money willingly, but he said something else. Then they're going to say, go to your local law enforcement authority. Then you're going to go to that municipal law enforcement entity, and they're going to say, we don't even have financial crimes detective here. I'm sorry. Have a great day. So there's really no recourse for people to.
Mhm.
And I'm not suggesting that they should not, right, seek justice, but it is an uphill battle for many, many times.
No, you're
And that's
right.
why they go to the National Center for Victims of
Mhm.
Crime, because it seems to me like you guys are really the only people who are a real resource for people in this situation.
And a lot of times, our hardest job is telling people we don't have the ability to hold anybody accountable.
Right.
We can't punish the offender. There's nothing we can do to the offender.
Yep.
We do the cleanup job. We're the cleanup crew. We can help you fix this. We can try to get this back together and get you ready to go. But our powers of any type of solution in the background are really limited. We have to leave that to law enforcement. And like Dr. Alex pointed out, there's a lot of times that law enforcement simply can't help with financial crimes. I mean, with the case that I pointed out, she hasn't even mentioned going to the police because she was willingly giving him this money. And his excuse is that he did invest it like he told her he was. He lost all the money. The money's gone. It's not his fault.
Right. And that's why so many RomCons are not accounted for. People are not reporting them. So we actually have no idea how prevalent this problem is, which is why we develop RomConned. Where do you see RomConned, our show, fitting into this in terms of helping victims?
I hope that the more we talk about this, the less shame there is around it. We're really waiting for a Me Too moment with
Yeah.
all types of fraud. So hopefully as more people come out and more people are willing to talk about it and realize this happens to a lot more people, that we could really start to mitigate that shame. But also, there's a huge true crime genre out there right now, and there are a lot of people who hate true crime. But I've actually become somewhat of an advocate for true crime in that it starts to get problems solved. You start to get eyes on cases that you thought were previously unsolvable. And I think the more we talk about this and the more there are stories out there, and that's where this podcast is great, people start to become aware and you start to be able to trace who's doing what and find your perpetrators and really kind of nip them in the bud before they even start to grow into something.
Right.
And I got to tell you that, Renee, that it was through Laurel that I found out so many things about this sort of obsession that people have about crime and about, solving crimes and all of that. But, as a criminologist of 30 years working in the field, it never occurred to me that people, out there wanted to be criminologists, or they were interested in the topic, except every time I would get on a plane and I would have a conversation with somebody and they would say to me, so what do you do for a living? And then initially, after I had finished grad school, I told them, I'm a criminologist. And then the first thing that they would say is, do you think so-and-so did it? Or can you go back to that crime? And they were great, conversation starters for them. For me, it was more like I was teaching on the way to, to Europe or wherever I was going about the various theories of crime. But I will say to you that our fascination has always been in place in the United States about violence and about crime. We've always been fascinated by trying to understand that which is a mystery. And I've often said it would be a lot easier for us to know the name of every star in the universe than for us to know exactly why people do what they do.
Yeah.
I've been studying human behavior for many years, and I can tell you it's still a mystery. But the one thing that I oftentimes tell victims about is we can learn so much from you so that other people are not victimized.
Yeah.
And this is it. That's a huge component, I think, of this podcast and the work that you guys do as well, is that, as Laurel pointed out, most of the crime that takes place in the United States is never reported, and therefore is never recorded. And so as a result of that, we call that the hidden picture of crime. And there's actually a name that we give it in criminology for that. And I think RomConned are case in point, because of the shame, because of the fact that there's just nothing that anyone's going to do to solve this issue. And so we're just getting to the absolute top of such a big issue that is affecting so many of us. And so I'm so happy of the work that you all do, Renee, and the fact that you've decided to come on our show to give the audience those resources that are badly needed, and to take away that image of vulnerability, if you want to call it, or shame, which is part of the effect that these bad guys are having on victims.
And I think that's what we are all doing, right? What the Center for Victims of Crime and RomConned, we're trying to show people that romance scams aren't about stupidity. They're about actually hope. And predators hunt hope. Victims don't fail. Systems fail victims. Shame is the con's last weapon. Healing begins the moment you speak. Renee, for victims who are struggling and looking for help and hope, what can they do? Where can they go?
They can start by contacting us. It is victimconnect.org. And we also have a hotline. You can chat with us, you can text us, and it is 100% free, 100% confidential. And we will work with folks on that safety planning and on getting them started to resources and to help.
Great. Thank you. If you saw yourself in David, you are not stupid. You are not weak. You are not alone. Real love makes you stronger. Predators hijack your purpose. This is RomConned, where love and true crime collide. And if you want more stories, more red flags, and real strategies to protect yourself, watch our channel, listen to our podcast, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs it.